In this video I will share with you how I made those lids, and especially many people asked me about the pink that I achieved in the middle. These are paints that I used for this project. The black, the pink, the white. There is my pigment Stardust, and these are resins I used. This one I used for on the top, but art resin I used for the main project, and that's what I always do. There's my rose gold glitter. This is my favorite alcohol ink. That's the company, so you know. This is the lid I used. It can be any lid. I painted this around. Of course I put the tape around the lid. That's the color I made for the for the middle part of the lids. A little bit of magenta and rose, and was a little bit too dark, so I added white, blended this well, and that I applied on my lids. I knew I would be covering it with resin, with that pink color. I wanted this to be a little bit brighter than the resin, not white. So I made those circles. I just couldn't decide what size I wanted to do it. I was just, you know, on the go. And that's my resin, pigmented with the wild plum. Really my favorite kind of pink pigment, alcohol ink. A few drops, and look, this color is just incredible. But my secret is this: when I combine this pigment with my pigment called Stardust, that's when the real magic happens. And this is just really, oh my god, effect. So look what happens. This pigment, maybe this video is a little bit overexposed, so it is pretty white, but when you look at it, it just has some purple and blue tint to it. When it is mixed with all kinds of pigments, it gives a beautiful effect. It enhances the whole thing amazingly. Every time I do it, I'm amazed myself. So that's the kind of effect, and it's very beautiful when the light hits the particles. So that's what comes through my art very often, because when I record my art using my pigments, I always use the flash, because any art, whatever it is, actually needs light, right? So nothing in the dark is sparkle. I use art resin mixed with black acrylic paint, and that's what I always use for my black. Actually, I use the blackest black possible on the market that can be mixed with resin. I used many pastes, but I never found anything that was satisfying enough. However, I always prefer paint under the resin. The color I use, if I use blue, then I will paint blue, because resin on the edges, when it goes down, it is thinner, so it will show through. I made a mistake here, let me tell you, and I wish I painted those lids a little bit better, so the copper color goes through a little bit. It's visible. It's kind of cool effect, but if you really want this to be covered well, I would have to use probably 2 layers of black resin. So it's better to paint this really well. Gently torch. Resin is already, I always wait with art resin longer time. I never start working earlier than 20 minutes, so it gets a little bit thicker. And so here I mixed Stardust, the same I used with the alcohol ink, with clear resin. Very tiny bit is needed. I made too much for this little project. I have another project on the side also, but it was still too much, way too much. I could do like 100 of these leads with that amount I made. And then I apply on it when the resin is pretty thick. It's like 35 minutes probably. So this way I don't get this all over the place. I want these lines to stay in place. You can even see when I used my toothpick that the resin is thick. It's actually probably even more than 35 minutes. And art resin doesn't, it has a really good working time. And it's not runny, so even in the beginning. But look, it's really, really thick. I should have waited longer. Oh, here is example of that plum mixed with Stardust. There is also her mood in the middle. So that's the effect you can get with this, and it can be added to any translucent pigment. So here I show it just to remind you that before the second part I sanded, and I also applied extra lines with Stardust, but here I used UV resin because I didn't like those lines before. They were too thin for me. So it added extra effect. Here I add rose gold, which unbelievably looks on black resin. And okay, so I wanted to say this for this project, and I have another project on the side, little box. What I added to this resin to cover the lids, I added more resin later, but to it. But it was way too much, and I always tell people, please use rose gold, very like tiny little bit. So I used the toothpick, and I should have used like 1/5 of it. I didn't like how much it was showing up on the project. It was for me a little bit, not way too much actually. So that's for future. That rose gold is for many projects. This little tiny 2-gram box is for many projects. Okay, so here's the resin. Of course, I torch the resin gently. So right now I'm using top coat from Mass Epoxy. It is extremely hard resin. So it's my last top coat, and I put those crystals on the wet resin, but they could have been put on this using UV resin. So I just decided to do it this way. So there's different effect because when the resin cured, you can see kind of like little dent, but I like this effect. I like how the crystals are shaping the resin around them. So this effect actually is cool for me. And here's another one. These crystals are a gift from Olga from Art for Start. They are amazing, and I have some molds from her, and I'm gonna get more. I believe that she makes really beautiful molds, and I'm going to make more of these crystals for myself. The advantage is that you can get really clear, beautiful crystals that are very difficult to get them in nature, and they are very pricey. So this way I think it's better. So I use some old box, and I cover my resin. Of course I use the toothpick, and I use the light very low, that I can see the mirror reflection of the resin and find all the particles. But after I cover it, I always make sure that it's covered really well. So when my fan is working or air conditioner or whatever, it is not gonna move under the container. I hope you enjoyed this video, and good luck with your project. Hello! Today I would like to talk about resin that I use. And let me show you, I tried many. And this is not everything what I tried. The most favorite resin for me is art resin, and I use it for every abstract resin art. Means whatever I do with my colors, the dirty pours, all kinds of effects, whatever I do with my art, I use art resin. I finish my projects with Tabletop Pro Mass Epoxy, and not every project I finish with this. It's when I create wall art, I still finish it with art resin. But if I do the functional art like cheeseboard, coasters, side tables, coffee tables, I finish them with Tabletop from Mass Epoxies because it is really hard resin. It hardens pretty fast. It's like maximum time, I guess, is 20 minutes working time versus 45 to an hour and more with art resin. Keep in mind, normally it's about 40-45 minutes. You should be done with your project around 30 minutes. Actually, when you mix your pigments or pastes, acrylics, resin heats up faster and also can cure faster, so keep it in mind. However, I cross those lines and I go beyond 1 hour or 50 minutes when the resin is very thick, when I do the first or second layer of my art, and I can create amazing effects because I work with thick resin. Tabletop is a super hard resin. However, there's no resin that can be, like they say, heat resistant coasters. It's not true. As far as I know, there is no resin like that, but this is the best one I found. It might change, and I wish it changes because I really love creating coasters. I'm showing also Art Pro, and I really don't use this resin, but I want to come back to it. It's very similar to art resin, but because I was using art resin daily and then I jumped into Art Pro, I saw a little bit difference, and also it dried not super flat, and I believe that was not due to the resin. It was probably due to the temperature or humidity in my room. But I got discouraged very quickly, especially that I was creating very expensive projects and I didn't want to fail. Consistency is very similar to art resin. I believe working time is a little bit longer. It's for me a little bit too long because I still have to wait when the resin thickens, and I am not sure 100% how far I can really go. So I think it's a good resin, but I didn't test that as much as art resin. So basically for coasters, tables, the last coat, only the last coat is this, and then art resin for any regular project. And this is something that if you use it, I think you'll be happy with this resin. So that is my first project I did, and I want you to pay attention to the white. The white is white like forever, so I cannot complain. And it's actually, maybe there's no direct sunlight on it, but it's next to the window, and before it was I hung it in front of my window and never yellowed. But I have a few projects that yellowed really badly, and I think maybe when the COVID time came, maybe the company was trying to cut some expenses, and maybe that's what happened. I love this resin. I just have to say I love this resin a lot. There is also art resin used with those stones and this project is maybe 1.5 years old, and it really didn't yellow. If it yellowed, the stones would look really ugly, but it's okay.
Did you get ready in the dark or something? 'cause you look like a beautiful nightmare. Don't you know? Don't judge me. I just wish you knew. That's just like you.